Anyway, so after that, it actually sets it up real nicely for the next section. It's basically the same kind of thing. Now you're doing intervals, which this is actually running up an arpeggio. This is an F major arpeggio. So that's basically the 10th fret of the B string to the 8th fret of the E string. Then you go up to the 13th fret of the E string to the 17th fret of the E string. So, and he uses the bar, he kind of dips half, maybe from like a minor, from the minor third to the major third, which is the 16th fret to the 17th fret, and then pulls off back to that 13th fret. So the whole thing. Now that part is he's bending up the whole step from the 15th fret to the 17th fret, going down, bending up and down, going down to the 13th fret of the E string. This is all on the E string. Then going down to the 16th fret of the B string, and then doing that again. But not going down to that 16th fret. So it's... And then he adds vibrato. So that whole part is... And when he pulls off those notes, when he pulls that off, he pulls that bar up again. Then he gets into a cool... This is the first of two fast runs that he does. And there's a little bit of chromaticism in this, but he's actually introducing the altered scale over the C section of this. This is all still over the C minor chord. And he does... And that's over the F minor chord. Now, that first section is a C altered scale, and we'll get into that. And then the second section is F melodic minor over the F minor chord. Let me just go through the lick real quick. It basically starts on the 17th fret of the B string, and then it goes to the 18th fret of the E string, pulls off to the 14th fret of the E string, back to the 14th fret of the B string. So, and then it slides down from the 14th fret of the B string to the 13th fret of the B string. Then it just walks down from the 15 to the 13 of the G string. And then it's the 14th fret of the D string to the 16th fret of the D string. Now, then it goes back to that 14th fret or 13th fret of the G string. So then it slides down a half step to the 12th fret of the G string, plays the 14th fret of the D string, goes back down another half step on the G string to the 11th fret to the 13th fret of the D string. So that movement is, and the whole thing is, and then it resolves on the 10th fret of the G string. Then it walks up a scale. And we'll go over that in a second. What this part is, that whole section except for those two notes, those pretty much are chromatic. It's just a chromatic idea. This section here is based out of this C altered scale. Okay, and what that is it's one of the modes of the melodic minor, and it's basically it's the seventh mode of melodic minor, and it's called an altered scale. So it's basically playing your. I'll just go over the one octave of the notes. You have your root, you have your flat 9, sharp 9, you have your third, you have your flat 5, sharp 5, then you have your seventh, your flat 7, and your root. So you have. Now, that could be also thought of in a different way. You could actually think of it as your root, flat 2, flat 3, flat 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, and root again. But when you're thinking of it in altered terms, you basically have your flat 9 and sharp 9, and your flat 5 and sharp 5. That's what gives you those outside notes. Let me walk up this scale in this position so that you know exactly what it is. It's your 15th fret, 16, 18 on the A string. Then your 14, 16, 18 on the D string. Then your 15, 17 on your G string. 14, 16, 17 on the B string. Then your 14, 16, 18 on the E string. So if you run up that whole scale, it's. And if you notice, that lick comes right out of that scale. I'll try and put that up here so you could actually see it. And I'll also try and, like I said, get this tablature out so everything's more clear. But so that lick is just basically that altered C scale with a chromatic idea. Now this is, I'll again go over these notes first, and then we'll get into what scale it's based out of. Because after he gets to this point, when he gets on there, that goes to the F minor chord. So it's starting on the root. And that's basically your 8th fret on the G string to the 12th fret G string, 13th fret G string, 11th fret B string, 13th fret of the B string, to the 10th fret and 12th fret of the E string. So that whole thing is. So then he does this thing where he goes from the 12th fret to the 10th fret on the E string and to the 11th fret of the B string. And he does that twice. Then he slides down from the 11th fret to the 9th fret on the B string. So, and then he plays the 10th fret again on the E string. Then he bends up from the 9th fret on the B string up a whole step and bends back down and then plays the 9th fret on the G string. So that whole thing is. Then he does the 11th fret to the 9th fret on the B string. He rolls down his finger on the 9th fret of the G string and he slides down to the 7th fret. So that's. And there's a pause between this note and that. So. Then he plays those 4 notes. Now also, if you notice what I'm doing, he's he does a lot of those accentuations of notes with the bar. So before he plays this note, he's dipping it down like a quarter step, maybe a half step. And before he bends this note up, he does the same thing. Then before he does this phrase, he dips that note down a little bit too. So the whole thing. Then he goes from the 9th fret to the 7th fret of the G string, then the 9th fret, 7th fret of the D string, and hammers on the 8th fret of that string, of the D string. Then he does the 9 to 7 again, but the next time he goes from the 8, that's 9, 7 on the G string, to the 8, 7 on the D string. But that 8, 7 is where it starts the C minor chord. So that whole thing is over an F minor chord. So yeah. And then the C minor chord to that. And if you look at that whole thing, it's F melodic minor, this whole thing. And if you think about what F melodic minor is, it's basically a major scale with a minor third. So if you start on the 8th fret, which is the F note, on the A string, you have your root, your second, minor third, 4th, 5th, 6th, major 7, and 8. Now the only difference between a major scale is that major third. So this is a major scale. And this is a melodic minor scale. There's only one note different in the two of those, but completely distinctive sounds. And the melodic minor gives you that cool little arpeggio. Now, we'll walk through quickly a whole melodic minor scale on F. So you start with your first finger on the 8th fret of the A string. All on the A string, you have 8, 10, 11. Then on the D string, you have 8, 10, 12. Then you have 9, 10, 12 on the G string. Now, the next move, you can move up a half step to the 14th fret on the G string, so now you have 4 notes on that string. From 9, 10, 12 to, 13, not 14. Then you could play the 11th fret and the 13th fret on the B string. Then the 10, 11, 13 on the E string. So that whole thing is... I don't know if I just said the 10, 12, 13 on the E string. Now, if you notice something on there, on the G string, you have this movement where it's the 9th fret to the 10th fret, which is a half step, the 10 to 12, which is a whole step, the 12 to 13, which is a half step, and then you go to the next string, which is the 11th fret, but if you played that on the G string, that would be the 15th fret. So you have a half step, a whole step, a half step, and a whole step, which is very reminiscent of some form of diminished scale. And that's what gives this melodic minor kind of a unique sound. Even though it's just one note different than, say, a major scale, it has that unique scale because you have that half step, whole step movement, which is very diminished, kind of like. Now, a real quick side note. One of the things that I always think of, I always talk about how I think of pentatonic scales all the time. And that's the way I see things. I just see things in those box patterns. People talk about the cage system. you know, that's part of it, and you see certain chord shapes and their relative pentatonics. Um, I think of, generally when I'm soloing, I think of pentatonic scales, then some intervals as far as major and minor third and flat fives, which is all the bluesy kind of stuff. Then I start thinking of other tones, which are like the flat nine, the sharp five, anything like that, which, you know, give you your outside tones. But then as far as scales goes, the only scales I really deal with, I don't really think in terms of modes that much. I think about basically the melodic minor scale. I think about the altered scale that we talked about before. And I think about a diminished scale. And other than that, it's just major or minor pentatonic. And then I start seeing like the intervals of arpeggios, chord tones, intervals as far as sixth intervals and major minor thirds and all that kind of stuff. What I just said may sound like a lot of thinking, but it comes natural eventually after you start doing all this stuff. You don't really think that much about it. When I start going for outside sounds, I don't really think of scales and stuff. I just start thinking of shapes and that I can move them up half steps or whole steps and do certain things. There's a million tricks. But I've never been one to learn a billion scales, a billion chords, and then always think, okay, I play this scale here, and then, okay, this chord's changing here, now I can play this. I just don't think like that. So, but with that said, I do regularly go to these specific scales, which are the altered scale, the major minor pentatonic, altered scale, diminished scale, and melodic minor. That's pretty much my library of what I do.